Good evening to you all. Pranam. Welcome. Thank you so much for the invitation. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah, thank you. So I'll recite a few mantras, if you allow me, as a Mangalacharan to further gain presence and arrival to today's gathering. Try to beg for the blessings of Guru Gauranga, Sri Krishna Vaishnavas. Om Jnanatirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshudunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namashashtam Manumapi Satchiputram Matra Swarupam Rupam Tasya Grajamaru Purim Mathurim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhikamadhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratitha Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natusmi Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Nikhila Shruti Mali Ratnamaladiti Nirajita Padapankajanta Aji Mukta Kulairupashyamanam Paritastvam Harinam Shamshrayami Anare Pitacharim Chidat Karunayavatirna Kalaham Shamarpaitamunnatoj Palarasam Sabhakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sada Hridaye Khandare Spuratu Vasati Nandana Ajanulambita Vujjo Kanaka Vadatu Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambaru Duyavaru Jugadharma Palu Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataru Ladini Shakti Swarupaya Gauranga Shohridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namostute He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Radhe Vrindavanadi Shri Karunamrita Vahini Kripaya Nijabhadabja Dasyanmayam Pradiyatam Bhaktya Vihinaya Paradha Lakshay Kshiptascha Kamaditarangamadhe Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanam Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Shri Sachinandan Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Prabhu Ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaudiya Vaishnava Guru Paramparam Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Sadhu Sangha Ki Jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Hari Bol. So again, welcome all. Today, as it was announced, we would like to share more in the format of what's sometimes known as Ishagosti, or questions and answers, though I personally prefer to use the term quest and exploration more than questions and answers, to indicate that the question sets us on a quest. Every question is a journey that we're starting to travel, where in one sense there are no final definitive answers, but we can always say something more. We can always say something more. That's what Vedanta Sutra say, Ikshati in Ashabda. Vedanta Sutra starts speaking about Brahman, Atatu Brahma Jijnasa. It's time to inquire about the absolute Brahman. Brahman means, by definition, the word Brahman means that which grows and makes others grow. So the purpose of life is to explore that reality which is in constant growth and expansion. So naturally, a few sutras after that, it says, Ikshate ena shabda. About that reality, basically we cannot say anything, or we cannot say enough. As much as we try to say something about the infinity, we can only touch one point of an infinite line, an infinite spiral. One drop of the infinite, as Srila Siddhar Maharaj will say, is infinite. And there's a whole ocean waiting there of infinity. But just one drop contains the infinite as well. So that's what I personally prefer to the notion quest and exploration. We are exploring infinity. So we can never come to a conclusive answer where there's nothing else to be said. That would be a very sad place to be. Imagine we sit one day for Harikatha and it's like, sorry guys, there's nothing else to say about Krishna. That wouldn't be good news, right? We are all coming to hear about the infinite, and sorry, but the infinite is exhausted himself. There's nothing else to say about the infinite. It makes no sense. That's why we can always say something. And even if we say the same words, if we are saying them sincerely, they are always coming from an ever new, ever fresh place. So there shouldn't be any exhaustion in hearing and singing about infinity. And that's basically the ancient method of giving and receiving knowledge and exchanging insights, no? Quest and exploration, sincere presentation of the heart. If we have any questions, any topic, any theme, any doubt, any crisis, any kind of worms, as we were talking the other day, kind of worms welcome to open here. So we can explore whatever needs to be explored to continue making our journey meaningful. No, we don't want to practice bhakti in a mechanical way. We don't want to make bhakti a social custom, a social performance. We don't want just to do niyama graha. Rupa Goswami clearly will say, if you want to damage your bhakti, you do niyama graha. In Upadeshamrita, he gives a sixfold method to ruin your bhakti. Of course, he's not recommending to ruin your bhakti, but indirectly he's saying, there are 6 things that really get in the way of your practice. One of them is niyamagraha, which has 2 meanings. One of them means to reject all prescriptions or ideas in a very whimsical way, like rebel without a cause way. And the other is to follow everything without understanding nothing, basically. To do things out of social norm because someone else is doing that. We may begin like that, it's fine. There's a beginning with some imitation, like babies will imitate their parents and they follow what they're doing. But there is a point where we should learn to live our life, our practice of bhakti. So for that question exploration, Bhagavad Gita is Ishtagosti, Arjuna bringing questions and topics, Krishna replying to them. Bhagavatam is the same, so many conversations back and forth. So all our main scriptures, Ramananda Sambat, Mahaprabhu talking with Ramananda Roy, bringing questions, saying something. We can always augment those truths, right? Like when Mahaprabhu will ask something to Roy Ramananda, and Mahaprabhu will say in reply, Eho Bhagya Aggi Kaha Ar. Oh, that's not enough. Augment that truth, please. And then again, augment this truth, augment the truth. And even when Mahaprabhu was satisfied with what Ramananda was saying, he said, please continue. There is no end to the conversation. Hopefully tonight, we can have a glimpse of that. We can be engaging, as Krishna will say in the Gita, Katayantas Chamam Nityam. My devotees get together to perpetually speak about me. It's a perpetual affair. And in that way, to Shanti Chara Manticha. Bodhayanta Parashparam. We can enlighten one another, we can nourish one another, we can give each other the higher taste, in Srila Prabhupada's words. So all that to introduce, warm up, and give you courage to bring any questions or topics you may have. If there is anything that you feel is worthy of exploration today, please feel free to raise your hand. So, okay.
Actually, last night we were talking about, for those that were there, you were talking about seeing Krishna everywhere in the material world and how beautiful that is, that actually Krishna is within all the atoms and that everything is conscious. And then when we went to the breakup groups and we were talking, and then I was just wondering, like sometimes you're perceiving the material energy as being very kind of hard going, and you're feeling.
Sometimes what, sorry?
You're perceiving the material energy as being very hard going. You're going through a difficult time. You're feeling like sometimes you're being dragged over the hot coals, and you're still aspiring to, develop a loving relationship with Krishna. So I was kind of trying to understand, like when you're going through that, how it's possible to see Krishna, in that positive way. Why can't, it's very hard to transcend it. And there was this movie that came out, you've probably heard of it, the Sringadev movie. And one thing that really struck me in that movie was how when they showed Prahlad Maharaj, even though he went through so much, Prahlad Maharaj, and we talked about Prahlad Maharaj last night, his love for Krishna just kind of made it all sort of like so pale in comparison to what he was going through. So sometimes it just seems, that's an advance, but for an aspiring devotee, so for like myself, just find I struggle sometimes to kind of, feel Krishna's love and see Krishna's, even though I know and I hear it and I think, oh, yeah, that's right, but the heart's feeling very kind of,
What's the heart feeling?
The heart's feeling very vulnerable, and it's feeling isolated, and it's probably feeling a little bit in despair, feeling like Krishna's, where's Krishna? Where are you? I'm suffering, where are you? Not feeling connected, not feeling.
Mm-hmm. The question is, Krishna, where are you?
Yeah.
Basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Valid question. So we can share some thoughts. Of course, I always like to remind myself. I'm not here telling anyone what to do, but I like to remind myself whenever I come to that place of Krishna, where are you? As you say, the first thing you said, I think, was Krishna's everywhere. So there you have the answer, right? Krishna, where are you? Everywhere. Of course, that's a theory. We may not experience that way, but if we know that's a fact, if Krishna is everywhere and I cannot perceive that person who is everywhere, somehow that means I'm nowhere. No? In other words, if Krishna is omnipresent and I'm not perceiving the presence of someone who is omnipresent, that means I'm omni-absent. So rather than asking Krishna, where are you? I should ask, where am I? Because he's everywhere. So I shouldn't be thinking or proclaiming, like, where are you? Like if he's not, if he is not anywhere, if he's everywhere. So the real question, the real introspection is, where am I? That I cannot perceive that person who is everywhere, basically. And again, I'm not saying that in a spirit of toxic guilt and shame, but at the same time of responsibility. No. I mean, Krishna is doing his part. He's everywhere. We cannot demand more than that. You cannot demand more availability to someone who is everywhere. So it's taking the reins and saying, okay, where am I? Because that person who is everywhere, I'm not finding it. And many times, that's something we talked about some days ago. Probably was in the Southern Island. Probably was in Navajo. Probably it was in England. I don't remember at this point. But we were talking how many times when we don't feel the presence of God, it's because we are having a certain idea of how God should appear to us. So he's not showing up in that way. We feel he's absent. Well, actually, he's showing up in a new way, in a deeper way, in a more intimate way, in a more merciful way. But we may be too attached of certain version of the divine, of certain experience we had in the past, Krishna. And that's an interesting invitation to renunciation. No? We should be detached. Sometimes we hear about detachment and we feel, okay, I have to be detached from bad habits or bad company or this thing or that thing. But something that we should also learn to be detached is to be detached from previous experiences of God that are real, but are no longer enough for where we are now. It's not that I'm rejecting them, it's that I'm ready for a new experience in the relationship. But if I remain too attached to who Krishna was for me yesterday, I may not be appreciating who Krishna is ready to be for me now. Right? It's like any relationship. I remember when I got to meet some of you for the first time, I had my first version of you, and vice versa. We have your first version of Swami Padmanabha. Then we met a second time. Seems that the first meeting went well. We had a second meeting. And then a third one and a fourth one. So we get to know each other in a new way, and we are discovering a new version of each other. But if I'm too attached to the first version and I got of you on day one, and I insist on that version, you will be like, I'm not that person anymore. So things are moving. So many times we have that same idea with Krishna. We are attached to a certain version, certain experience of the Absolute. And sometimes Krishna is getting closer to us. I mean, that's the nature of the Absolute. He's always getting closer to us at every moment. But as we were talking the other day, many times we don't like that much when people get too close to us. We had a hard time with intimacy. Even with Krishna. As much as on one side say, Krishna, I love you, give me your mercy. And then he tries to get closer and closer. It's like, too close. So we kind of picture him at certain distance. And that's our version of Krishna. Sometimes a distant God. He tries to get closer and closer. We don't register that version. So we insist on the distant version. And that version is not distant, it's getting closer and closer. So I will feel, where is Krishna? He disappeared. So in those moments of despair, in those moments of suffering, those moments of disappointment, confusion, existential crisis, you name it. Some of you guys do not know what I'm talking about. Just give life a few years. It's coming, no problem. That's not bad. It's part of the journey, right? The very first chapter of the Gita is called Vishada Yoga, the yoga of desperation. Interesting way of beginning a book about yoga. Let's learn about yoga. You think, okay, we'll learn to put my legs over here and become like a pretzel or something. Let's talk about desperation first, the yoga of despair. Let's acknowledge that you will get into those moments. And that's part of yoga. That's part of the yogic path, to embrace those things in yoga. Embrace despair in yoga, in connection with the divine. And try to gradually see and discover Krishna getting closer and closer to you at every moment, including the moments what sometimes we feel the less deserving. Sometimes in moments of despair and suffering, we feel I'm a mess, I'm not doing things properly, I'm not deserving this or that. But unconditional love cares nothing for that. It only continues to advance. So you mentioned the word vulnerable, how it feels in the heart at times, vulnerable. Well, when we are vulnerable, that's the moment that we may be more sensitive to open ourselves to Krishna's grace. It's not necessarily in our most impressive moments, in our most perfect days, Sometimes we get too attached, too complacent when things go all nice, all right. Like one of my teachers will say, sometimes you grow more by doing it wrong than by doing it right. When you do it right, you sometimes become proud and complacent. I did it right. Nobody can tell me anything. I did it. When you do it wrong, you maybe become humbled. You're willing to learn. You become more open to grace. You become more aware of your need of help and support. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm never using the word easy in any of these answers. I will never use the word easy in this whole lecture. Because easy is not, it's never the way out. Just in case. Don't have that false hope. Things will be easy. No, easy is boring. Sorry. I mean, you can have some moments of easiness. You can eat your ice cream. It's fine. It's okay. But if everything is easy, you will be the first ones to complain. It's like if I'm teaching you a new raga and a harmonium, and you learn master it quickly, and then I still insist on the same thing that now is easy for you, you get frustrated. Maharaj, give me something more difficult. You will beg for difficulty. Sustainable difficulty, not extreme difficulty. So it makes life exciting. So those moments of difficulty are when life gets exciting. We need to reframe difficulty, not thinking this is bad, this is Krishna chastising me, this is God disappearing from my life, I must be doing something wrong, and that's why I'm feeling like that. Not necessarily. You don't need to go to any of those places. We can just see, okay, this moment of special difficulty, vulnerability, it's putting me in a sensitive position. I can beg for grace. I can learn my lesson. And I can see the presence of the divine getting closer and closer. As it happens in all the main narratives in our tradition. Again, Krishna in the Bhagavad, Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, he's not precisely in his comfort zone. Bhagavad Gita is beginning. That's why the whole book starts with Vishada Yoga. Arjuna is in despair. Arjuna is in an existential crisis. He doesn't know what to do with his life. I mean, I hope all that speaks to our journey many times. We may not have literally our uncle on the other side of the battlefield and who will kill each other, who will kill whom, but somehow we may be put in very paradoxical situations where we are bewildered and we are suffering. And that's how the Bhagavad Gita starts, like implying sometimes you need to get to those places to experience some paradigm shift. Sometimes you need to get to those places to change what you couldn't change otherwise. And some people can change without getting to those places, but if I happen to be in those places, there must be a reason for that. There's some paradigm shift trying to be conveyed to me through those moments. And I shouldn't be praying to Krishna, get me out of here as soon as possible, because that's another way of many times escapism. Okay, you are suffering, sit with the pain. Let the pain become a teacher and teach you some lessons. It's not a Krishna, make me happy, make me happy, make me happy, only happy, only happy, only happy. That's a very flat emotional spectrum. Only happy, only happy, only happy. If you study the emotional spectrum in transcendence, all the emotions are included there. There is sadness, all the rasas, study the rasas. The main rasas, of course, Santa Dasa, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. Secondary rasas, you have fear, you have anger, right? You have these apparently negative emotions, but all of them being expressed in the context of love. So there is place for all of that. So yeah, we need to sit with those things that unsettle us, and sit enough time so they deliver their lesson. As we were talking yesterday about how the Bhagavatam says, a disciple who approaches in an affectionate, open, sincere way, Sri Guru, the teacher, will reveal all the secrets. So in the same way, we need to approach. Yesterday we were talking about approaching the material nature. That was yesterday?
Yes.
Yes. Approach material nature as a Vaishnavi, as it described in Shastra, and a proper approach to a Vaishnavi or Vaishnava, they will be pleased and will reveal all their secrets. So in the same way, pain, discomfort, they're all gurus at the end of the day. So if we approach them with a willingness to learn, they will reveal their teachings, their secrets, what we learn from them. Not easy, right? But not impossible either. So, and I can only speak for my own personal life experience. I cannot speak for anyone else's life. But if I look back and I have to go through the most painful, bewildering, confusing, difficult, crisis-like chapters in my life, biggest lessons of my life came through those. As terribly difficult as they were, at the end of the day, you look back and it all makes perfect sense in one sense. And you are totally grateful, and you have been bestowed with such gifts that you could have never imagined. But somehow you need to go through some little version of hell, so to say, to die in a certain way to a version of you, to be born to a new version of you. And then to discover a new version of Krishna. Because again, Krishna is always updated, upgraded. Oh, Krishna is always becoming more beautiful, more merciful, more loving. So if we are not dying and being reborn constantly, we may not be able to keep the pace of Krishna's ongoing upgrades, so to say. So we must be willing to die to live. That's the message of all the mystics. Different traditions, they will say something like, die before you die. Right? We need to die before we die many times. And it will feel difficult, painful. Arjuna in the Gita says to Krishna, I prefer that the Kurus just shoot me with arrows and kill me physically now. In other words, rather to die in the way you are inviting me to die, to an older version of myself that I'm attached to, that death is way more painful than if they just come and kill me on the spot. So he's making the point, yeah, it's not easy, but it's necessary. Asatma satgamaya tamasama jyotirgamaya mrityuma amritam gamaya. This famous Vedic aphorism. Go from asat to sat, from illusion to reality, tamasama jyotirgamaya. Go from darkness to light. Mrityuma amritam gamaya. Go from death to immortality, or to eternal nectar, amrita. So the word amrita that speaks for immortal life, immortal nectarian life, amrita includes the word mritya, which is death. So you want eternal life, you have to go through some form of death internally to release an older, outdated version of yourself and be ready to discover yourself anew, again and again and again. But there is so much hope when we get trained in that. There is so much hope, and we find so much relief in those moments of despair or suffering. The sweet absolute extends himself in a special way to reach to us. If we are willing to discover him in that way, you will find in moments of great loss. That was my experience. When I lost the most in my life, Krishna appeared in such a way to compensate that loss. Such an abundance, such a robust way. But for that, I needed to let go of my, the identity that I had before the loss. So the loss came, and with that loss, there was a loss of my sense of identity that I had to release to discover Krishna's appearance and compensation. Because if I will have what clung, was it clung to my older me before the loss, that was already gone. But if I will insisted, no, I want to remain being this, I couldn't have found how Krishna was making himself present in such a generous way. So I needed to, release. And there was so much vertigo, you say, in that, like, okay, Is there something else on the other side? And there was so much. But you can only experience that once you release the other part. It's like lifting the anchor, and then you can do the journey to the other side. So that's the call to the adventure. And that's why we need, as we were talking yesterday, the sadhus in our lives who are leading by example that courageous lifestyle and are showing by the way they walk their talk. There is something on the other side that we cannot yet see, but we can see them living their life in a way that it calls us to follow their footsteps and discover our own potential. Yeah, and again, pain, suffering, bewilderment, nothing of that should be, we shouldn't feel bad about them. And we shouldn't stigmatize those things because, of course, in itself, pain, suffering, we don't feel good about that. But if we on top of that feel guilty or feel bad about feeling those things, then we add another layer of misery into the whole thing. Or we feel guilty and ashamed, and then we are feeling that, then we reinforce a pattern of toxicity that is dragging us down and down and down. So being in those vulnerable moments is a great moment to realize how I'm still being loved and accepted unconditionally by Krishna, by his agents. Yeah. But we should show up in that moment also for others. We should show up in our vulnerability. We shouldn't hide till we are impeccable again. We should show up in vulnerability, in proper circles again, not in social media. Like, I'm so vulnerable. I want to say to the world that I'm very vulnerable. Put a like if you want. No, because many people don't have a clue what to do with your vulnerability, with their own vulnerability. So that may end up in a disaster. But if we have a few people that we can trust in, we need to be vulnerable in those circles. And that's an act of courage to show up being vulnerable, fragile, confused. Like Arjuna acknowledged all that in chapter 1 of the Gita. He told Krishna, I'm terrified, I'm confused, I'm this, I'm that. He was not. So that's where Krishna was able to say something eventually to him. Sit with your emotions, acknowledge them, voice them in safe circle. The healing is already begun if you start to do that. The rest is a matter of time. What do you think, Smoky?
Thank you.
But apart from thank you, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, you said so much. I have to, deeply think about it all. But yeah, I liked initially when you said, "Where am I?" rather than "Where is Krishna?"
Yeah.
Because as aspiring devotees, of course, we do know that. So you're feeling a little like, oh, this is silly. I know Krishna is here, but I'm not liking perhaps what is happening right here and now.
Yeah.
And I know that Krishna loves me, but why is this happening? So it's always projecting onto Krishna. That I thought that was just quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than where am I? And also that point about having to, transformation to have to take place, like maybe, and that when something that appears kind of a reverse comes, there is also wealth with that, and there is something really tangible that you see as a gift that you've been given that you didn't have before. So, and and I guess it's a case of it's maturing, like you say, by association and hearing from devotees, and maturing into the fact that growth is not always painless. So no, thank you. Lots of really good points.
Yes, you say in the last part, growth is not always painless. It's like I was thinking about this typical example. If I don't move my arm for 10 years and I do this, like I will do a tapasya of not moving my arm for 10 years like this. The moment I try to do the slightest movement of my arm, that will feel like torture. So painful. But who is to blame? I'm not going to blame Krishna. I'm not going to blame my arm. It's just acknowledging the fact that I've not been training the muscle, and the strengthening of the muscle is painful due to past neglect. So we may not be that trained in moving some inner muscles. And when we are starting to activate them, it pains, it hurts. But that's a symptom that you are doing something with them also. So
also that point you were making, I don't know whether you used the word humility, but sometimes for some of us, this is something I have to go through. You have to be brave that you have to go through that maybe it's not as straightforward as it's for somebody else, or maybe there's something there. And that Nishringadev movie, I don't know who saw it, but I was just so struck how, I mean, it's a funny movie because it was sort of like Indian made movie, but Prahlad, he was just like, even though he was just being dealt with so severely, the way they pictured it and captured in the movie, you really just got a sense. Every time it came on to Prahlad, it was like, it was just like a relief, and like, oh, it's so beautiful. And I think that I found that really inspiring at the time, but I think I probably thought, oh, wish I was Prahlad, kind of also not jumping too far ahead to kind of realize that actually, okay, it is a process of transformation to get to the point where you, like when Gaudiya says, that these calamities come, or Prahlad Maharaj was able to tolerate those things. So just, accepting that, both, accepting growth, being courageous, like you said.
Yeah, there are different examples in scripture of great personalities. Each one will express their greatness in different ways, like the examples you just quoted. And we all are invited to be inspired by them, but probably we are not always suggested to try to imitate them. Like, I don't know, Vasudev is telling Mahaprabhu, liberate everyone and pass on to me the karma of every single living entity. You have to have deep realization to say that. Just try not to impress Mahaprabhu. Look how compassionate I am. Imagine Mahaprabhu say, okay. I said, no, I was just joking, of course. But he was saying it, he was meaning it. So it's okay, wow, incredible, so inspiring, someone can be so compassionate. I may not be able to do that. But it's still inspiring. But you have to acknowledge where you are. That's an important lesson throughout scripture. Swe adhikari janishtas aguna parikirtita. Acknowledge your adhikar, that's real virtue, that's real beauty. Acknowledge where you are. Not to stay there forever, but in order to change, first you have to acknowledge where you are. Because if you are not properly rooted in sincere assessment of your current position, you're going to change anything. Because if I think I'm more advanced than where I am, whatever I try to change from that imagined place of more advancement will never happen, because that's not where I am to begin with. Sometimes devotees get a little bit obsessed with growing and progressing and getting more advanced or getting to that stage. But first they have to acknowledge where they are. How many times we don't want to go there? Because where we may be may not be the most glorious place on earth yet. And it's okay, it's where we are. It may be humiliating for the false self, but we have to learn to acknowledge where we are and find the beauty in it, actually. So that's an important preliminary lesson in the Gita and in the Bhagavatam and everywhere. Be honest about where you are. Don't think you are more advanced at what you are, and don't you think you are less advanced at where you are, because you can go to both places. Those are two varieties of sahajism. I'm trying to rush to a place that is too far ahead of me, or I'm trying to not advance to the place I'm being called to advance in the name of humility. No, I'm too fallen, I cannot do that. No, you can do that. And you should be doing that. No, I'm so fallen, it's not mine to do that. It's yours to do that. It's time. So it's important that we learn to acknowledge, okay, where we are. And it may be an ongoing question. Where I am, what is mine to do? What can I do? What I cannot do yet? And learn to accept yourself from where you are to change. I mean, because we want to grow and change and transform, first we need to learn to accept ourselves where we are. Not to stay there forever, but to change. So we should be careful not to hate our current position, so to say, or hate where we are, as limited as we may feel it, as we were talking today in the morning. Even with all the ups and downs that characterize bhakti in its unstable chapter before reaching nishta and other stages where there is more stability. Before that, there will be undulation, there will be ups and downs. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes all of them as symptoms of bhakti. Unstable bhakti, but symptoms of bhakti. They are confirming that you are on the path. I'm feeling despair, crisis in the context of bhakti. Don't forget that part of the sentence. No. I'm confused, I don't know, in the context of bhakti. So you are already on the sacred path. Therefore, there's reason to celebrate. Yeah, but there is suffering. Yeah, of course. That has to happen. A certain part of the journey. Certain things we need to go through. So yeah, learning to accept that. Many times, most of our sufferings are due to unwillingness to accept what is inevitable. We are so expert at being stubborn and in denial and not being willing to accept what is already there. I'm dealing with that. And instead, like trying to create some other reality, spiritual bypassing. Prabhupada says that in one commentary in the Bhagavad Gita when Arjuna tells Krishna, I better become a renunciant and run away from this battlefield and dedicate myself to being a mendicant. And Prabhupada say, oh, here Arjuna is trying to use Krishna consciousness as an excuse not to be himself, not to follow his path. He didn't say spiritual bypassing, but he's basically saying the same thing. So we should be using bhakti for bhakti, not as a mask, not as escape, but for the sake of growing in bhakti. And that takes accepting where we are, learning to be grateful for all that we have, and on that foundation of gratitude, proceeding to the next level. But stopping to be grateful and appreciating. And with proper contentment and appreciation and gratefulness, that naturally will create the momentum to continue and wanting to honor that even deeply, serve that even deeply. Yeah. Madhuri Amrita, you were raising your hand.
Just trying to understand why the verse says that is real beauty, to acknowledge where we are. Adhikara. In what sense is it real beauty?
That's a rendering of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The verse original says guna parikirtita. So it's real virtue. Sway adhikari janishta. To be firmly situated where you are. To acknowledge your adhikara, your present, current capacities. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur translates virtue for beauty, which is another beautiful, virtuous way of doing. Why is beautiful? Well, if you meet someone, let's bring it here. No, we are meeting a person with all their limitations. No, we are not over idealizing anyone. Each one has their own stuff, but you are seeing that they are owning it. I mean, they are honest, they are open, they are sincere, they are willing to learn, to change, but they are not faking it. No, they are not trying to create an idea of superficial superhero-ness. No, that has a beauty, that has an enchanting aspect. Oh, like kids. No, we were talking yesterday. No? No? Babies, kids, young kids, they are very much, at least in the first years, they are unfiltered. So they are accepting where they are. Confirmed. So there's a beauty in that. Like, wow. A baby, if someone brings a baby now, there are a few over there, but they will bring it. As I always say, if I'm giving a lecture and someone enters with a 2-month baby, my class is over. All attention is like, whoa. Oh. So why we are so attracted to a baby? Many reasons, of course. One will be going back to your question, the baby is so vulnerable. So vulnerability has its beauty. Baby is vulnerable and it's not hiding the vulnerability. And going to your question again, a baby is who he is. And it's messy. It urinates himself, it's shouting and screaming, but it's not putting on any mask. It's like unfiltered, raw being. It's charming and it's equally challenging. But why it's challenging? Probably because we have put so many masks ourselves on top of us that when someone is raw, unfiltered, it's like it's mirroring back too intensely because it's reminding me of all the makeup, so to say, and all the masks that I'm putting on top of me, so people do not see who I'm actually am. So there is a beauty in being yourself, in not hiding who you are, in not hiding your fears, your doubts, your frailty, if there is such things. I mean, if you are in an honest, intimate conversation with someone and someone from a very honest place acknowledges something that makes them vulnerable, but from a very genuine place, everyone probably will be like completely captured by that moment. I've witnessed that many times. Someone cries from a very authentic, sincere place. Probably everyone else ends up crying with that, along with that person. So there is a beauty in that. There's something charming when we are trying to be ourselves. No, as much as we can. Doesn't mean that we have already attained our Swarup and our eternal identity in the Lila, but trying to be as honest as we can where we are today. Tomorrow will get better and the day after tomorrow will get better, but today, with my toolkit, how can I be as sincere as I can? We're talking today in the morning. Krishna is not demanding be perfect, be impeccable, be flawless. He's saying be sincere. Not even demanding, but inviting. Be sincere, even with your imperfections. He says to Arjuna, you better do your dharma imperfectly than someone else's dharma perfectly. I don't care for perfection. I care for sincerity. I care for you being you. Not you cannot be anyone else. Though we try so hard on a daily basis to be someone we are not, to be the other person, comparing each other with everyone else. And Krishna says, stop that exhausting exercise, that exhausting lifetime. Why you are so violent to yourself? That's so exhausting. Why you cannot be yourself? Why you are not content being yourself? And of course, then comes the whole thing, because I'm horrible, because I'm useless, because I'm worthless, and then we need to dismantle all those false narratives. You are not worthless, you are not useless, you are not any of that stuff. Krishna says, Nagita, you are amazing. Ascharyavat, Ascharyavat, Ascharyavat. 3 times he says, soul is amazing, amazing, amazing. So knowing that, at least in principle, try to be at peace with yourself and try to be as much of yourself as you can. And that's beautiful. For those who are, again, for those who have a real understanding of beauty, unfortunately for some people, beauty is only put as many masks as you can, and that's officially labeled, oh, that's so beautiful. I mean, that is just a parade of superficiality and evasiveness and escapism. Some people, oh, beautiful. But that's a false sense of beauty to escape the real beauty that demands vulnerability, honesty, inner nakedness, right? He's reminding us of all that. Yes. So yeah, there is beauty in seeing someone trying to be themselves, which is it's not easy. It's not like you press a button and oh, here I am. This is me. Well, it's complex. Even on a relative level, each of us have an acquired nature, swabha, right? And we need to engage with the world to find our vocation according to our acquired nature. That's one level of speaking about be yourself. Where you ultimately be yourself is your eternal identity in the lila, but that's another level of the conversation. First, we need to be balanced human beings on planet Earth. Because if you're absolutely dysfunctional and cut off from your swabhav, that will get in the way. Krishna says in the Gita, even wise men follow their acquired nature. So who am I psycho-emotionally? I may not be talking about the Atman and Bhakti. Who am I psycho-emotionally? Varna Ashram is all about that. Varna Ashram is be a balanced human being on planet Earth. Be who you are according to your acquired nature. Accept yourself. And again, that takes us to a big conversation about self-acceptance and the opposite of that, which is many times not only self-rejection, but self-hatred many times. That's a very interesting word that is more popular in the West than in the East, I will say. No, this famous story of I think I mentioned that a few times, of the Dalai Lama, when he went, almost one of the first time he arrived to the West. He was given a lecture introducing the basics of Buddhism. So he talked about compassion and this and that. And at the end, someone asks him, and his English, he was starting to learn English, so his English was basic. So someone asked him, so Dalai Lama, how to deal with self-hatred? So the Dalai Lama didn't understand the question, because he never heard about the word self-hatred. He never knew that such a thing will exist. So he was 15 minutes talking to his translator, asking him if he thought he was hearing wrongly the question. He was asking him, what is he saying? So the translator was trying to tell him how to deal with self-hatred. And back and forth for 15 minutes, because he couldn't figure out there is something called self-hatred. So after 15 minutes, he was kind of in shock. He has like an epiphany, like, you hate yourself? So he said, from that moment on, I adjusted my whole presentation of Buddhism and began from that level, speaking to an audience that probably is hating themselves, rather than going to higher levels of teaching that are maybe too high for many people in the audience. So that's an important point in the sense that we are in this Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition in our Bhakti movement. There is such a refined theological depiction of Leela, so much details, beautiful. I'm all for it. That's what I'm here. And yet, sometimes we may have all this very high, deeply esoteric revelation, but sometimes we may hate ourselves. And we may need to work on that to make proper sense of what it means to say Radha and Krishna and Braja Bhav. And one is in the service of the other. They're not two separate things, right? Because serving Radha and Krishna Vrindavan means, as I say, always entering Nara Lila, serving in the human pastimes. But how can I fully serve in a human pastime if my own humanity is dysfunctional? No. So I need to have a properly integrated humanity so I can really appreciate the full humanity of the Lila and the full divinity of the Lila. The Lila is fully divine, but fully human. And sometimes for us, it's easier, quote unquote, to become divine than to become human. Right? Sometimes we go fully into being transcendental and we lost the humanity on the way somewhere. So what transcendence is that? An inhuman transcendence that doesn't compute together. Yeah, there is a beauty in accepting. This line basically says there is a beauty in self-acceptance. There is a virtue. It takes virtue to learn to accept yourself. It doesn't happen automatically. It takes effort and will to accept yourself, to love yourself, I will say. There's this verse in Narahari Sarkar's Krishna Bhajanamrita and say, he prays, may I have love for the name of God, may I have love for Krishna, may I have love for the deity, may I have love for the Vaishnava, may I have love for, long list of may I have love for, And the last one is, may I have love for my own self, so I can properly love Bhagavan. He saved the best for the last somehow. He's concluding with that line. Wow, may I have love for myself. Interesting. Doesn't need to be selfishness, doesn't need to be narcissism. I love myself because I want to love Krishna, and loving Krishna means loving the things that Krishna loves. He loves me. So I need to learn to love myself. Because loving God means, Prabhupada say, you love me, you love my dog, right? In other words, you love me, you love the things I love. Okay? Krishna loves you. So learn to love yourself in the context of love of God. So there's a beauty in that, no doubt. We'll go here and then we go with Nandaki. Comes down to the.
Yeah. So you were talking about being comfortable with being ourselves, and then previously you were also talking about spiritual bypassing. Could you say something about, like, I've also experienced that just as like one can be afraid to be themselves and reveal their where they're at, where their thoughts, and try to present something else. Also, I've experienced sometimes there can be a sense of, in the name of being myself, like this is where I'm at, and I'm comfortable with that, and it comes across as, at first it comes across as this is someone who's very genuine, and it's very attractive. They seem very humble. But then, as I got to know, I'm just thinking of someone in my mind, but as I got to know them better, it was like they were using it as a form of spiritual bypassing. So in one sense, it was like, oh, it seems like a genuine thing, but at the same time, it's like, oh, we're not coming to associate with the devotees, and all these things. So it's like, so I'm just wondering, you can say a little bit about that, how on the other side you can, we have to somehow have a balance, like, I didn't maybe explain that very well.
No, it's clear. It's clear. I think it's clear, yeah. And of course, you say you had something in mind, and of course, someone in mind, and I may say something in general, but each case is unique, no? Like, for which reason someone, as you gave, the person may say, okay, no, I'm not going to meet with the devotees, for which reason, I don't know. Each case is different. But the main point of your question, I understand it, and my first reply will be, yeah, potentially everything can be spiritual bypassing.
Because it's
right?
difficult in that situation, because they're being so like presenting and so like vulnerable, and this is where I'm at, and so there's nothing really you can try to say, like, to, like, if you want to try to encourage or inspire or anything like that, it gets deflected. This is just, it's another type of escapism.
Yeah, again, that's why I say it depends each case, because for some person it may not be escapism, it just may be what they need to say at that moment. Let's say someone never in their life established any boundaries in their life about anything, and they were like people pleaser the whole lives. To give an example, right? So they never learned to say no. And there was always, so sometimes the person is like, I'm okay here. No? And you can feel that there's a boundary there. It doesn't mean that will last forever, but after a lifetime of people pleasing and zero boundaries, they may need to. And for the other person, it may feel a little bit like abrupt, like, oof, I cannot say anything here. But maybe they need to take that strong stance to begin with, and in time, it may get better accommodated, and they will be open and willing for input, but it's their way of learning to put boundaries. I recently have a situation with someone like that. Again, not necessarily mentioning names because it can happen to any of us. And this person was really reacting in very like unexpectedly, like even harsh ways, you could say, how she reacted. And I was a little bit like surprised, like, wow, I don't think that your reaction is proportionate to what I'm saying or what I'm doing. And eventually she told me, no, the point is that I'm learning. She told me I'm learning to set boundaries in my life. I've never done it. So I may be a little bit inexpert, you say, in doing that. So it may feel a little bit like harsh. Sorry, but I need to. And when that person is clarified, it's okay, I can understand, no problem. So I wouldn't call that spiritual bypassing. That's my point, right? But in other cases, that may be spiritual bypassing. So it's very depending on each case, their situation they're in, the needs they have. I think there is a place for all of us. I don't know. Let's say you come from a very traumatic situation, a very exhausting, draining situation in your life, whatever that may be. And you just need to rest. You need peace. You don't need people to tell you what to do with your life, how to improve, how to change. Just let me rest. And one could say, oh, you are doing spiritual bypassing because you are not open to advice and growth. And no, it's just I'm coming from this traumatic, exhaustive experience. I just need to reset the system for some time, and there is place for that, for the healing, no? Some hibernation chapter. And eventually that person hopefully will be open. Of course, if it happens that in time that person is not open and you can see it's not getting good, then we may have to say what was necessary and healing at that time eventually ended up becoming bypassing. But that can happen also. What at one point is helping me, at one point it starts to become something that is becoming an obstacle or suffocating me. You follow? So it's not like
No.
if this is happening, it's always bypassing. If this is happening, it's never bypassing. It cannot be always bypassing. Can be never bypassing, depending each person, each situation. So yeah, it requires like a deeper personal connection and time spent with the person to know what's actually going on. Because if we just from the outside, we may be misjudging, mislabeling people and situations. Oh, you're just bypassing, and probably not. So yeah, I don't know if that helps.
That's very good, man. Yeah. But yeah, and actually the example you gave of the soul living whose nature was to be a yes man and to do everything and to give a lot and perhaps feel exhausted and unappreciated and to a point that it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and especially with people, if someone was given a lot to certain, let's say I've been given in a very people pleasing way to all of you for 30 years, toxically already, too much, but somehow you became accustomed to having me doing that. So whenever I set the boundaries, for most of you may feel like, oh, why you are so selfish suddenly? Right? And it's not that I'm selfish, I'm actually more balanced than ever. But you are accustomed to me giving in a very disproportionate way. So whenever I reduce that, why so self-centered? Like, no, I'm in a healthier place. But for the other person, it also may feel that way. So they may even reflect back to you a distorted picture of you trying to set boundaries. So it's important to also have a proper environment. So when we are trying to set those boundaries, even if it's a little bit in a clumsy way in the beginning, we have an environment that says, no, I can understand you are setting boundaries, good for you, I understand this, rather than saying, why you're suddenly so selfish, why you're not giving as you were used to give, because that may create even more more guilt or more whatever, right? So yeah, it's important to also have proper support when we are trying to do those things. We have to do it ourselves, but also we need an environment and supportive environment too. Yeah. Thank you. And keep Prabhu.
Keep going now. You sort of answered the question already, but
It happens.
I was thinking that, like, we sometimes have this perception. I have this perception. I don't know if I have it now, but I had it that everything works on a formula. Like there's a formula to get out of any situation. And, you know, like if you follow a particular process, you'll get out of it. You'll get out of it whatever is been difficult. I suppose it's another form of spiritual bypassing. There's something there that's going to fix everything for you. I was thinking like trying to put an IKEA furniture together. There's certain steps, but if you miss one step, you never get there. You gotta wind back and go back and try to fix. So is that a spiritual bypassing if you have that idea about spiritual life that there's a formula for everything, and if you stick to the formula, then you're gonna get there.
Again, yes and no. What do I mean by that? At a certain stage of the journey, in the beginning especially, you need the formula. You need to be this like this like that. You do A, B, B, C, and this is how it works. So you need like this absolute certainty. You do this, it takes you there. You do this, and you're like, okay, I have all the answers to everything. I know how to do everything. I'm totally. In the beginning, you need that. So I won't call that bypassing. It's just what you can deal with at that stage. Then when you grow, you realize, oh my gosh, life is way more nuanced and complex, and there are not always easy answers to everything. And even you start to read scripture and start to find things that seem to contradict, not necessarily, but seem to, and you need to harmonize and reconcile, and things said by acharyas and things going on inside your own life. And you start to realize, okay, now comes another level of working with things where there's no like one fixed formula. So at that time, if we insist on a formula in a very rigid way, that may become spiritual bypassing for sure. But I wouldn't say that to be the case in the beginning. Even if you want to say in the beginning there is bypassing, but you are not aware because you are just too much of a beginner, but you are trying your best with the tools you have. So I wouldn't call that bypassing. You need that formula in the beginning. You need that certainty. And you in the beginning probably will have more black and white reading of things. Now, there are the devotees, of course, us, and then there are the karmis, right? The non-devotees. If you want to get calling the demons, if you want more spice into the masala. At one point, at least for me, all of those words do not make any sense anymore. No, I cannot use those words because it's too much black and white. No, it's too conclusive about the other people, and it's too conclusive about me. Because if I say I'm a devotee, I'm not a non-devotee. Come on, there's so many parts of me that are non-devotional even. No. There are the impersonalists. I'm not impersonal. Come on, there's so much impersonalism still. And probably I meet with someone officially impersonal, and it may be so personal in so many ways. So it's not like black and white. But in the beginning, we may get a black and white picture of reality. Because that's our capacity. We can just deal with black and white. Too many colors, we get overwhelmed. Too much variety and possibilities. Like, stop there. Give me the easy formula. Okay, it's great. More simplistic. Again, you cannot go to your 2-year-old boy with a complex existential arguments, theological premise. I mean, he will look at you like, breast milk, please. Theological arguments. But why these adults bother with all that stuff? Keep it simple. But then you grow and become complicated. And you become interested in other things, and things become more nuanced and more complex. And And then we have to integrate all that complexity. So then, yes, at that time, if we insist and stick to the formula, it can be complex. Like for example, of course, I do not disagree with chant and be happy. That sounds like a formula. And I do not disagree, chant and be happy, but sometimes we can employ those one-liners in ways that are spiritual bypassing. No? I don't know. Someone comes to me and said, Maharaj, I have just come from a very traumatic experience with it. I said, chant and be happy. That won't work, probably. I mean, still chant and we will be happy, but there are a few other things that we need to talk about. So if I not need to talk about any of that, just chant and be happy. But then the question is why most of us cannot just do that. Right? Someone may ask now, Maharaj, why you are talking about all this stuff, psycho-emotional balance and all this other, why just not chant and be happy? And I will ask you, what you tell me why you cannot just chant and be happy. And still you have to do so many other things in your life. Who is following that? The chant and be happy, but between the chant and the be happy, there is a brackets and a few long list of considerations to have in play. So when you chant, you're being happy. Because if not, you are using the chanting as spiritual bypassing. No. And that's not a way to honor the name. Right? Oh, my wife is here disturbed and she wants a divorce. I will chant and be happy. I will transcend all this nonsense. No, put your job a bit aside and sit with your wife and have a proper conversation. Grow as a mature human being and learn to talk to one another, to listen to one. No, chant and be happy. Right? So we can use everything again. Everything can be spiritual bypassing. That's why Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, when he's speaking about anarthas in Madhurya Kadambini, he's saying, interestingly saying, Sukritot anartha, duskritot anartha. So he starts with the obvious, anarthas that come out of impious activities. Then he brings the contrast, sukritot anartha, anarthas that come from pious actions. Oh, really? Anarthas can come from being pious. Yes. Then he says aparadot anarthas, anarthas which come from aparad. Okay, that's more obvious. Then he brings the opposite, bhaktiut anartha, anarthas that come from bhakti. Of course, bhakti doesn't bring anarthas, but if you use bhakti as spiritual bypassing, that becomes an anartha. So he brings the opposites to say you can transform everything into an anartha. Piety, impiety, offense, bhakti. If you are not embracing it from an honest place, you make everything a mask instead of everything a mirror. That is mirroring back to things as they are, just masking. So yeah, sometimes rather than looking for formulas or for answers, sometimes we, as we said before, we may need to sit with a question and stay with the question enough. And eventually the question will bloom into an answer. But I want the answer. Maharaj, give me the answer, the formula. Sit with the question. That's the formula. That's the answer. The answer is sit with the question. The formula is there is no formula. Somehow. Or maybe the formula, you need to discover a new formula, the new formulas. But we are dealing with love, right? And love is a very dynamic reality. So love, Rupa Goswami say, Aheri bhagati premna shrabhava kutilava vet. Love moves in a crooked way like a snake, in zigzag. So love is not predictable. It's not like one straight line that, it will go this, then turn right, then turn, I will catch it on the other side of the corner. It's unpredictable. So how much you can bring a formula. Many times formulas is our attempt to control reality, to put things into a box, boxing things, labeling things, which is an attempt to control. How do you say in Sanskrit, that which can be controlled? Maya. So to be in Maya basically means trying to to control things, no? Rather than releasing and trusting reality in all its unpredictability, trusting that there is an order in the unpredictability, a love in that which we cannot control. But again, in the beginning, we may need a formula. So that's why I'm saying it's not something that we have to discard altogether. It depends on every stage. And for me, it's complex to see all this because I'm talking to a mixed audience of different people. Many of you I don't even know. So some of you may need the formula. And some of you may not need the formula. So please take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. And I trust your discernment. And sorry if I'm disturbing anyone in the audience with my words. Because it's complex, because I may say just general words, but each one of you is in your unique individual chapter of the journey. So you may need something very different from the other. And what inspires, I remember my own journey, what inspired me at one point, at another point became suffocating. I needed to release that and discover a new version of Krishna consciousness. And then another version and another version. I hope that helps. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose it's like trusting that there's some order in the chaos.
Yeah.
Like the Indian traffic.
Yeah. Like the what? Like the Indian traffic. That's you want to have an experiential realization of that? Yeah. We just came from that a few weeks ago. Yeah. Somehow they managed to live with that. Yeah, there is a teacher of mine, he will use the expressions order, Father Richard Rohr, Franciscan author. He will say order, cycles of life, ongoing. Order, disorder, reorder. Over and over again. That's how we progress. No? We are a certain stage of life. Everything is in order, in place, formula, everything working, everything controllable, measurable. Okay, it can work for some time. At one point, you need disorder, some disruption, because that order starts to become suffocating, stagnant, boring, whatever. You need some holy disorder. And it feels like chaos and challenge. But eventually, you learn to coexist with that and discover a reorder. So a new order of things, which is broader, more accommodating, more deep. But at some time, that reorder becomes order. It starts to become like status quo that needs to be disrupted again. New order, and so on and so forth. And I always like to give the example of the Rasa Lila, Krishna with the gopis, right? Krishna, the gopis are at their home, Krishna is at their place, relatively everything in order, working, harmony in the village. Krishna plays the flute. Disorder. Like it's a thunderbolt disrupting whatever was happening. No? Gopis were doing anything that's left behind and they just run into the dead of the night, into the forest to meet Krishna. They meet Krishna. To reorder, a new order now with their beloved. But eventually Krishna tells the gopis, you go back home. What are you doing here in the forest? It's too late. I'm a single man. Most of you are married. The village won't think well of this. Go home. Unpredictability. No? Disorder again. And the gopis start to argue with Krishna. And they defeat Krishna in debate. And they stay with Krishna. So reorder. There's order again in a more accommodating way. And they start Rasa Lila, start to sing and dance. Order, nice. At one point, Krishna feels this is getting boring. We need some other layer of disruption. It disappears from Rasa Lila. From order, disorder again. Right? Gopis in their disorder looking for Krishna, singing in separation, eventually meeting with Krishna again. Reorder. A new level of harmony, a new level of love, and so on and so forth. Right? So that's an example of how these cycles happen, not only in the Lila, but in our daily life as well. And that's how you make progress. There has to be some disorder stage in progress. Progress doesn't mean everything is neat and clean and impeccable. There's part of that order. That's the part for that. Then we need some disruption, to some stirring of the Tao, so to say, some movement. So we just need to accept the cycles of how progress happens, basically. Yeah. Something else you would like to share? Who? Badra, you raise your hand?
I'll say something. That's okay.
That's okay. More than okay.
You know that I totally resonate with your stance.
I think they want you to use the microphone. I will extend the microphone to you. Sorry. Yep.
Maharaj, you know that I totally resonate with your stance and your angle of vision and the opening up and revealing of different meanings or a different level of meaning of so many Shastric verses.
But
No, there's no but.
no, I was joking.
It's so I'm not really asking this question for myself because I feel the truth and I feel the love, and I don't doubt in that from that place. I'm just wanting to get a little bit more sort of perhaps intellectually clear for the purpose of my own analysis, but also more for talking with others, and because you come up in conversation, you know, and people want to understand. Some devotees want to understand where you're coming from. They hear things and they want to understand. And so my query is around, you're saying all these things which I just totally resonate with. Like, you don't like to use the word non-devotee, and I totally agree with that. It really puts the Jiva into a box, non-devotee. So, but I have this quote here from Krishna book, from Srila Prabhupada, which seems to be different, or even I could say contrary to some of the things you say, particularly that mood around people who haven't recognized yet, souls who haven't yet recognized that they're Vaishnavas. Can I just read it a little bit?
Sure.
15 seconds.
Yes.
Page. Those who are not devotees, this is Srila Prabhupada in Prayers by the Personified Vedas in the Krishna book. Those who are not devotees but are engaged in uncertain processes of self-realization, such as Gyan, Yoga, Karma, are understood to be still contaminated. Such contaminated persons, although apparently advanced in self-realization, cannot even liberate themselves, what to speak of those who follow them. Such non-devotees are compared to chained animals, for they are not able to go beyond the jurisdiction of the formalities of a certain type of faith. In the Bhagavad Gita, they are condemned as Vedavada Rata. They cannot understand that the Vedas deal with activities of the material modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So basically, my question or desire for clarity is around the assessment and, I would say, judgment of people who are into Dhyan, Yoga, and other forms, and even their followers. It kind of, this is what it did to my mind anyway, conditions the mind that those people are not in a desirable position. I'm in a very desirable position. I've become a Gaudiya, aspiring Gaudiya Vaishnava. But all these other people, they're not. So I just, in connection with what you teach, which I totally resonate with, and is so nourishing and uplifting and illuminating. How would you reconcile those sorts of statements from Srila Prabhupada?
Now it's getting spicy finally. I asked for a can of worms, and there it is. Joking. Thank you. Of course, we could say different things. And for me, always it's important to put everything into context, because many times it happens when questions are asked, okay, this was said, whether this Prabhupada or some Acharya or some verse in a scripture, and every statement exists, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It exists in a particular context. Something has been said before, after, there's a whole chapter in which that statement is, that chapter belongs to a book, that book exists in the context of a larger body of works, in the context of a particular tradition. So all that is context that needs to be brought into the picture when we refer to one paragraph or to one verse. Because if not, we can decontextualize our teachers, and that will be a great disservice. So I like to say, text out of context becomes a pretext many times. So I can cherry pick statements from any scripture. As we were talking before, anything, it can be spiritual bypassing. I can read the scripture in a very bypassy way, and I can reinterpret out of context the Bhagavad Gita just to justify a holy war and to kill my relatives or to do whatever. Right, exactly. Well, you're having a problem with your mother-in-law, you just read Bhagavad Gita out of context. God is blessing your pursuits. Right? I'm just going to an extreme, but sometimes we create this nowadays, these online wars in terms of this was said by this teacher and this, and we whole not holy, but inquisition, online inquisitions in how we speak to one another in the community. And many times it's just out of decontextualized bringing. And Rupa Goswami says in Lagu Bhagavatamrita, where we find one statement in the scripture and then another statement which seems to contradict the first statement, we should not cherry pick the one we like the most. We should bring both into conversation with each other and find a deeper reconciliation. And for that, you need to invoke a bigger picture and understand the context. So that's that goes for this and anything. We just want to start with that. Prabhupada is saying a few things there. He's speaking about, he's using the term non-devotees. So I have nothing against the term non-devotees, but my main point is how it has been used historically more and more in a way that is promoting a type of superiority complex in those who refer to others as non-devotees. And does not invite for the humility and the introspection to analyze, where am I as a devotee? Because it's easy to label non-devotees and devotees, and sometimes the term non-devotees ends up being applied, which Prabhupada is not doing there, to other devotional paths which are not my Gaudiya path. So let's say I'm meeting a Sri Vaishnav, a Franciscan monk, and all very saintly, genuine devotees, but I may call them non-devotees because they're not affiliated with my devotional tribe, and that's not proper. Of course, you can call karma, jnana, yoga non-devotional in the sense that bhakti is not their main thing. So there's a way in which you can technically say there are non-devotees in the sense that their main pursuit is not bhakti. So that's more of an objective assessment rather than a passing judgment like, you are such a bad person or something. Okay, you are having another interest rather than bhakti. We practice bhakti for the sake of bhakti, at least in principle. Bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya. We are not practicing for mystic perfection, for heavenly delights, for intellectual achievements. In principle. In practice, we may be contaminated by some of self-centered, separated agenda. Now, Prabhupada, while speaking about yogis, jnanis, karmis as contaminated or inferior, whatever, he invokes the term Vedavada Rata, which is one of the 4 types of people who do not surrender to Krishna, as Krishna describes them in the Bhagavad Gita. So that's qualifying the rest of the statement. So that's why I'm saying everything is in context. So in my reading of that, I was listening to you and I'm reading, okay, he's speaking about jnanis, karmic yogis as contaminated, this and that, non-devotees. And in that context, he used the word Vedavada Rata, which basically is one of the 4 categories of impious people, even atheistic people, which somehow despise the scriptures and so on. Not necessarily every karmi, jnani, and yogi are Vedavada Rata. But there can be a karmi, jnani, and yogi who fit into that category. So in that case, we can say all those things. But even if we say all those things in that case, we will say that not with hatefulness and resentfulness and bitterness, because still there is a soul that is loved by Krishna. And Prabhupada said that many times. Krishna loves everyone. So we have to bring all those things, all those statements on the scale with those statements. Prabhupada will say if you meet, and sometimes he will say strong things about impersonalist. But sometimes he will say, by that process you attain the absolute in the form of Brahman in eternity. Sometimes he will say, if you find a Mayavadi sannyasi, you have to offer pranam to that person. And you will say, but Prabhupada, you told me to insult him in the other section. So there may be apparently contradictory things. And again, this all comes to also to whom he was talking at the time, if it was an individual conversation, a morning walk, or if it was a more open lecture, which was the audience at the time, which was the level of understanding at the time. Will he be saying exactly the same things here and now? So that's for me one of the most important questions, not only relate to Prabhupada, but to any of our previous acharyas. Okay, they say this, and we try to follow and honor that. But also an important question is, not only what they said, but what will they be saying now? In some cases, they may be saying the same thing. I'm sure Prabhupada will still say Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because that doesn't change. But some other things, he may have different ways of saying it, different depending on the maturity of the audience also. So those are a few thoughts regarding to how I read that. But mostly my main thing is that, yeah, he's describing jnanis, yogis, karmis as Vedavada Ratas, which is qualifying them in a certain category, which is basically not favorable to the scriptures, basically. There's people who might pursue karma, jnana, and yoga from that place. And Prabhupada had some words for them, but still, in other sections, he will say, every soul is wonderful, Krishna loves everyone. So we have to be putting all that together, so when we are seeing or speaking about them, we are not doing from a place of superiority complex and this and that. And when Prabhupada is saying, oh, they are contaminated, probably he implies with selfish desires. We should have the integrity of saying, oh, where am I standing in relation to that? Doesn't mean that because I'm a bhakta, I'm automatically beyond selfish desires, right? Because if I'm still finding my selfish desire, I shouldn't spend much time pointing at how selfish other people are. I have to do my own homework. It's a big temptation to start to see everyone as inferior and contaminated, and they have so much work to do. You're all guys so incomplete. That's the easiest temptation. That helps no one. strict with yourself, merciful with others. Prabhupada will say. So that will be my reading and trying to understand that line and again harmonize with everything else that has been said. Right? Yeah. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanam.